Question has been asked, what is a divine alchemist? And as was said the other day, we know that there are three kinds of alchemists. There are those who seek to become rich by making base metal into gold. There are those who experiment with the chemistries of life in endeavor to make an elixir of physical immortality. And there are those that equate the purifications along the path of chemistry to the spiritual path that leads to liberation. But the question remains, what is divine alchemy? So let's see what happens when we put two stories together, what their chemistry evokes in us. Perhaps you'll remember that being called Birbal. Know that there's that story about when he was a small boy and the King Akbar wanted someone to create a perfect portrait of him. The young boy gave him a mirror and then invited him, when he was grown, to come to the palace. Well, Birbal did indeed become a close advisor and confidant of King Akbar. But there are those in the palace who were very, very jealous of Birbal's closeness to the monarch. So they plotted against him. And they elicited the aid of the greedy Baba who had served the King Akbar's father and now served King Akbar himself. So the plot was arranged after giving the Baba a great deal of money. So one day, while the Baba was cutting King Akbar's hair, he asked his father, the king, "How is your father?" And King Akbar replied, "You know very well that my father is dead." And the Baba said, "Well, don't you wonder about his well-being wherever he is?" And the king said, "Well, yes." And so the Baba said, "Well, I happen to know a magician who can send an emissary to heaven to find out what is going on there. But of course, this emissary has to be someone of great esteem and great intelligence and acuity, someone like Birbal." And so the king said, "Oh, well, what would this magician do?" And the Baba said, well, a pyre must be made, and the emissary put on the pyre, and a flame made, and then the magician says some incantations and sends the person in the body up to heaven. So the king thought this was a wonderful idea. So he, of course, called Birbal to him and told him what was intended. And of course, Birbal immediately knew that there was something afoot, and he asked, "Well, who suggested this? How did you find out about it?" And the king said, the Baba. Well, of course, Birbal knew what was afoot. So he said, "This is a wonderful idea. I'm all for it. But would you please give me a month? I've got to arrange my affairs. And could the buyer be just put near my house? Because there's an ideal spot for that buyer to be made." So it was all arranged, and a month was given. And in that month, Birbal got some trusted people to come and dig a tunnel from the place where the buyer was to be located and his house. So after the month, of course, with great ritual, Birbal was taken out and put on the buyer, and the magician was there, and just as the fire was being lit and the smoke was whirling around, and the magician was making his incantations, Birbal slipped down into the tunnel and went into his house. Well, after that ritual, the days passed. In fact, weeks and a couple of months passed. And Birbal in his house grew his beard and his hair. And then there came a day when Birbal went to the king's palace and, of course, was greeted by the king with great delight. "Well, you're back from heaven. How was my father? How did you find my father?" "Oh," said Birbal, "he's very well. He's very, very happy there. He has all that he needs, except one thing. He hasn't got a good Baba." As you can see from my hair and my beard, I wasn't even able to have cut. So, of course, the king knew immediately the ideal person to be sent off to heaven, and so he was. And then there's that story about the king who bought himself a great swatches of the most expensive satin from China to make some uniform for his courtiers. So, of course, this task was given to the court tailor, who, being given this very, very, very great job, had to hire some other people to assist him, because there was a lot of work involved in cutting and sewing, preparing these uniforms. So it so happened that Mullah Nasruddin was hired. But he wasn't a very good tailor, so the tailor used to send him off for mostly to do the errands. But as it happened, the king sent along a number of his courtiers to oversee the work, that none of the satin was being stolen, that it was all being taken care of in the right and proper manner. So it so happened that one day, to encourage the tailors, the courtiers brought along a great deal of halwa, you know, that very delightful and delicious sweetmeat that is so loved by the people in the Middle East. But it so happened that Mullah Nasruddin was out on an errand, and everyone enjoyed the halwa, and the tailor said to the courtiers, "Don't bother about keeping any of this halwa for Mullah Nasruddin, because he doesn't like halwa." So when Mullah Nasruddin came back from his errand and found out what had happened, that there was not even a crumb of halwa left for him, he was quite peeved about this. So the next time the courtiers came to oversee the work, Mullah Nasruddin went over to the head courtier and he said, "I have something to tell you. Our tailor has bouts of insanity." "Oh," said the head tailor, well, how is this manifest?" And Mullah Nasruddin said, "Well, he starts looking around everywhere, under everything, and feeling around on everything." "Oh," said the head courtier, "what do we have to do?" Mullah Nasruddin said, "Well, you have to give him a good beating to wake him up, get him out of it." So The next time the courtiers came, Mullah Nasruddin hid the tailor's scissors. So of course, he immediately started to look under everywhere and tap everything to find on the material where were his scissors. So the courtiers took up the call, went over and gave him a good beat. And when the tailor asked the courtiers, well, why had they done this, and they explained what Mullah Nasruddin had said, head tailor went over to Mullah Nasruddin and he said, "How come and how is it that I have fits of madness? And since when have I had fits of madness?" Mullah Nasruddin said, "Since I didn't like halwa." So if we put the chemistry of these two stories together and put them into our cauldron, because alchemists always have a cauldron, and it mixes with the chemistry of our being. What's the meaning that arises for you from this? What's the aroma? What's the elixir? What's the divine alchemy? What is it that's there, that arises for us out of combining these two stories? Birbal and Mullah Nasruddin.
Well, it's like the cause and effect, and really how other people would deal with it is not the same as how we
would deal with it. Yes.